everyone. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet as we break down our last post-game show of the inaugural season of Kenny and Renny. Yes, it's all over, all coming to an end as the Montreal Canadiens, pushed as they may have, were not able to extend this series past 5 games. Interesting game, looked very much like the final game, Game 7, between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the New York Islanders. Ken and I had talked about this before the game, about the value of scoring that first game, and it sure came down to it. That Tampa Bay Lightning, I don't know if there's a team in the NHL that makes a 1-0 lead look more insurmountable than the Tampa Bay Lightning. We'll get into all of that. First, we got to bring Ken in here. You know what time it is. Here's his music, everybody. Here comes Ken. Ken, my friend, they are sad in the chat room. Marcus, who we've noticed around here the last little while, a little bit heartbroken. The tears are coming out. My heart, Sean says, Habs hurt my soul. It's a tough one here tonight. What did you say? Hey, hold on a second. Je suis triste. What does that mean, Ken? Are you good with your French? Do you know what this means?
It's definitely I am something. I'm not 100% sure. I'm guessing it's I am sad, but
sad or something like that. I would guess. Alex Gagne, boy, we love hearing these kind of comments. I enjoyed listening to our show. We'll continue next season. We would absolutely love to have you. The easiest way to do it, we'll remind everyone here, because we've got over 200 people watching the show already. Just go check us out at Kenny and Renny on YouTube is the best place to go. If you're able to subscribe to us there, you'll get notifications and we'll come up. Kenny and Renny will definitely be back next season. We're really, really happy with this inaugural season. You know that because we say it every time. I'm so happy to spend the time with the fans and be able to break stuff down. So before you take over the chat room and tell us what we're talking about here tonight, Ken, what did you make of that game?
Yeah, a good battle by the Montreal Canadiens. Kind of, I guess if you want to call it, one mistake ended up in the back of the net. Basically, that's what happened. I mean, it wasn't even really it's not a glaring mistake. It was a combination of errors, Sean. We've talked about this throughout the course of the hockey game, whether it was texting one another or on our Sound On chats. But Montreal was not in a very strong defensive position. On the play itself, Ross Colton started the play off with a really good forecheck to get the zone time started. There was a cluster of players along the wall, a subtle play by Steven Stamkos when Joel Armia's stick got caught underneath him. Stamkos held it tight to his body. It kind of provided the lane for Ryan McDonagh at the top. McDonagh fakes the shot very smartly. Corey Perry kind of bites. The puck goes over to David Savard, and an outstanding play by David Savard. Ross Colton finds himself with inside position on Joel Edmondson, and he's able to convert the play. I mean, small errors that added up to one big thing, and Carey Price did everything in his power to keep his team in the game, Sean. A couple of those saves are seriously of the highlight reel variety. That save that he made on Palat early in the third, I mean, man, oh man, we said it at the time, you got to put a star beside that one. And if Montreal had found a way to get into overtime, you would have highlighted that save and said, man, the Canadiens couldn't have got there without him. Price really elevated his game in the last 2 games of this series after saying he needed to be better. Montreal was unable to really find their offensive game, I think, in this series, but Vasilevskiy just absolutely outstanding. I actually thought Kucherov would probably I think going into the game, I think Kucherov had the slight edge, but based on the shutout and based on the Lightning now being 14-0 after a loss in these last 2 years, and Vasilevskiy posting 5 shutouts, including, replica 1-0 victories over the Islanders and the Montreal Canadiens. I think that's why Vasilevskiy got the nod from the media folks who were able to put their ballots in. Just an incredible job by an incredible team, but really impressed by the battle level by the Montreal Canadiens, but they just simply couldn't solve Vasilevskiy. And we had some questions about injuries, and our pal Eric Engels asked Dom Ducharme just minutes ago about what the laundry list of injuries were. Gallagher was groin and other things, and Tyler Toffoli was indeed playing with a groin injury, which certainly impacted his skating in the last 2 rounds, specifically against Vegas and the Tampa Bay Lightning, because he was just simply not as effective offensively as he had been throughout the first 2 rounds and change.
I can tell you something and by no means am I comparing myself to an NHL hockey player, but I did play senior hockey until I was 35, and I can tell you, Ken, from having played with cracked and broken ribs before, having broke my wrist and taping my hand to the stick and not missing a game, I've played through all kinds of injuries before. One injury that I was not able to play through, I couldn't even walk the stairs, is when I pulled my groin severely. People do not realize how hard it is to play through a pulled groin. You had said it, Ken, and I said I always defer to you in this. Ken sniffs out injuries in players like a bloodhound sniffs out criminals on the path there. He is phenomenal at it, and you could definitely see the ability for Toffoli to push and to get to where he was going seemed extremely limited. Tough break if you think about it for the Montreal Canadiens, because to lose a score like that, which they didn't fully lose, but to not have him at his best, it clearly affected him. He was great in the first 2 rounds, not as great in the next 2 rounds. That severely hampered this Montreal Canadiens' ability to score, and you sure saw that showed up here in this series. Ken, I'm going to break this down like this. Let's do the first half.
Break this down first.
Yeah. Let's do the
Let's hope not. I'm hoping to be protected.
No, we're hoping to lock that up. Let's do the first half of this show. The first half an hour, we're going to talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning. Last half an hour, let's do all Montreal Canadiens, what they've accomplished here, where they go from here, what a run like this means for their young core. Let's get into all that kind of stuff. But I like this. Let's start with the guy who won the Conn Smythe Trophy. Tracy O'Kranick says, does Vazzy direct his rebounds? It certainly looked like the rebound always went to a Tampa player. Yeah, I saw this. I know exactly what you are talking about. This is, Marty Brodeur at his peak level goaltending in my mind, of a guy who is controlling the game in so many ways. Like you said, shots are coming to them, and it's almost like if you don't get a shot that challenges him, it's problematic, because he's looking to turn the puck the other way. And I just saw that so often with that Tampa Bay Lightning team tonight, that it was so hard for the Canadiens to get pressure. I'm going to steal this one. Ken and I both saw this, and we talked about it in our sound on before this. Ken talked about it first. I'm going to talk about it now. There's a play towards the end of the game there when the Montreal Canadiens are pressing and they get to the puck to the front of the net. Rebound kind of squirts out, and it's Corey Perry trying to get to the rebound, and before he can get there, Andre Vasilevskiy takes his stick and clears it off to the corner. And this to me is a microcosm of what makes Andre Vasilevskiy a great goaltender. He's the big and boring style goaltender that you would get with a player like Carey Price, a player like Connor Hellebuck, but I think that his ability to fight through traffic in front of the net, to get his eyes on pucks when players are trying to take them away, and to be able to have that puck awareness. I mean, in that case, there's a schmozzle of players in front of the net, and no one in that schmozzle is more aware of where the puck is than Andre Vasilevskiy, and to be able to fight through it, to hold his ground with all those players pressing on you, and find the puck with your stick and be able to play that puck out of trouble, out of danger in a situation like that, I just thought was a perfect microcosm of exactly who he is. I'm going to say this because I know we have a lot of Jets fans in here. They're not going to like to hear it, but if we're having the conversation of who the best goaltender is on the planet right now, results speak extremely loudly. Andre Vasilevskiy, when was the last time he wasn't nominated for the Vezina Trophy? It's been a while. He's got back-to-back Stanley Cups. He has a Conn Smythe Trophy now. Andre Vasilevskiy holds the title as the best goaltender in the world right now. It's something for Connor Hellebuyck to chase. I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with that. I know there will be analytics people who will say something about that, who will have something to say about that. Andrei Vasilevskiy, his ability to show up in games exactly like this, shuts out the Montreal Canadiens 1-0 in the cup-winning game, shuts out the New York Islanders 1-0 in the semifinal clinching Game 7. We talked so much about Carey Price throughout these playoffs and how if you were able to score 2 goals as a team, that was usually enough for him in these playoffs. How often was 1 goal enough for Andrei Vasilevskiy? His performance in these playoffs, completely and utterly sublime, Ken.
Yeah, tremendous. Love the way that Vasilevskiy played, and he was a deserving winner of the Conn Smythe, I believe. We think that, Montreal kind of got their confidence up with those two games where they put 3 up, but Vasilevskiy, you had a feeling he would rebound. He's done an excellent job of doing that, and I'm going to shift to the defense because I love this here. Mario here. Sean and I were talking about Ryan McDonagh. I was fortunate enough to cover a couple Rangers series early in, I think 2013, 2012, 2013, 2014, that range where the Rangers were really good. Just really was able to find a great appreciation for his game, and his series and his playoff were outstanding. John Cooper said it this morning. Ryan McDonagh wasn't going to get votes for the Conn Smythe, but he was one of the probably top 5 most important players for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he made some. Yes, he had some points, some assists that were critical, but his reads were even more important than the points, Sean. His defensive play is sublime. He also did an exceptional job. He knows when to pressure, much like Montreal did to their 3 prior opponents. McDonagh's ability to jump up and make plays. He was the guy who stepped up after Blake Coleman forced the turnover of Phil Danault in Game 2 late in the second period before that Coleman goal. McDonagh makes one of the most important plays today. He's a valuable leader. He had been to the final previously with the Rangers, now 2 Stanley Cups for Ryan McDonagh. I thought he was absolutely exceptional on a team that has just an absolutely ridiculous defense core. We talked about David Savard. A lot of teams were looking to upgrade. David Savard, Tampa Bay Lightning give up a first and a third rounder to get him, and he plays on the third pairing. That's how deep this team is. They're 4 lines deep. They had 6 excellent defensemen, and they did just an absolutely phenomenal job in this series. And yes, Victor Hedman is the undisputed leader of that defense corps, but Ryan McDonagh did an exceptional job. And guess what? Mikhail Sergachev is a guy who is absolutely on the verge of incredible things. He didn't put up the points in the playoffs, but he really enhanced his defensive game. His compete level is super high, and he's going to be an excellent top 4 defenseman for many years. Cooper said earlier on, he basically sees him as a hybrid of Ryan McDonagh and Victor Hedman. And I'm telling you right now, Sean, if that's the case, you got yourself a pretty darn good hockey player if you have a combination of those 2 players with all of the gifts that they have together.
Let's go here. People are asking this question about where the Tampa Bay Lightning go from here. It's a great question. We just actually talked about this on our Sound On. I like this approach. Tampa is just in another league. How different will they look this year? I like this approach as well from Ben Ehrlich, who asks, what's stopping Tampa from going 3 in a row? Well, that would be the thing that would stop them is who they lose. But the question, if you're the rest of the league, is are they going to lose enough that they can come back down to earth? I've said this before. I take a look at their last 2 playoff runs here right now, and I think the only thing that's essentially stood in the way of the Tampa Bay Lightning handling the rest of the league quite easily is Barry Trotz and the New York Islanders. And I give the New York Islanders a ton of credit, but I give Barry Trotz even more credit. I have said this before. I think he's the best coach in the game, but I don't think he quite has the lineup that can take on a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning. Ken, if you take a look at Tampa, who are the players that you see not being back next year?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who they lose in free agency. We've discussed this before as well. Tyler Johnson, Joe from Winnipeg says he has an untradeable contract. We'll see about that. Seattle would have some interest in terms of Johnson potentially being a culture carrier. How much money do they have to hold back or keep in that potential deal, or what kind of a sweetener does there need to be? That remains to be seen, but I would see him as a possibility to go to Seattle, but it would probably have to include someone else as well. In terms of the free agents, Blake Coleman is a guy who's going to have an absolute massive lineup for his services. He's probably going to be able to make more money elsewhere. Does he want to stick around for a chance at a three-peat? We'll see about that. I think Barclay Goodrow is a guy that would have a lot of interest in sticking around Tampa Bay. I mean, does someone want to pay him a little bit more to try to entice him to go elsewhere? I mean, we'll see what happens. I would think Yanni Gourde is moving into the top 6 with Tampa. I mean, Matthew Joseph came in and did an exceptional job in that fourth line. I think he's ready for at least third line duty by next season. And when you look at their core group, Sean, I mean, they're going to have a healthy Nikita Kucherov. Look what he did in this playoff, going back-to-back 30-plus point years in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Just an exceptional job. When you have Braden Point just sort of coming into his own, when you have Steven Stamkos, you have Anthony Cirelli, you have Yanni Gourde, you have Matthew Joseph in more of a complimentary role. You're probably going to have Alex Killorn. We'll see about that. They may have to move him. But we know he's one of John Cooper's favorite players, so they're going to do everything they can to keep him. I mean, I think that Pat Maroon, is there a chance he could come back for a four-peat for himself? We'll see. On the back end, most of their defense are under contract and probably coming back. Could they lose Eric Chernak either in in expansion or maybe in a deal? I mean, we'll see. But if you have Andrei Vasilevskiy as your fan, we talk about the Jets. So if you have Connor Hellebuyck, you can be a contender. So if you're Tampa, you have Vasilevskiy, you are still in the conversation, and you still have Nikita Kucherov, who's one of the best players in the National Hockey League, and you have an emerging star, or you're already a star in Braden Point. So I see the Lightning being a legit contender, and I know for a lot of the Canadiens fans who maybe aren't as optimistic, let's not forget next year we're probably going back to a scenario where there's 2 wildcards in play. So yes, it would be tough for Montreal to finish in the top 3 in the Atlantic, going back to the Atlantic, but I still see the Montreal Canadiens as a wild card team. It's not a done deal, but I think they're just starting to emerge. I mean, as long as they get Carey Price playing close to this level, you have Suzuki coming into his own. I mean, a couple folks have already mentioned it. You have Josh Anderson.
Let's save that for the back half of the show. Let's stay with Tampa for now.
Right.
We'll get back into that.
Sure.
That's the whole purpose of the back half of the show. Let's do that then. Let's stick with Tampa right now. I'm taking a look at Cap Friendly and seeing where they're at, and their cap hit right about now is about even right now without guys without including Barclay Goodrow, Blake Coleman, players like that. They'll lose guys like David Savard and Luke Shen. They're still over by about $4 million as it stands right now. Right. So I'm thinking there's a couple players beyond those players. Like, I know you were talking about this before. I think both Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman are gone. I think that those players are out the door. They're gonna have to basically lose a guy. I think you're entirely right. Tyler Johnson is the biggest candidate. I think that they're gonna have to send someone down the road with him, but I do think it makes sense for him to go to Seattle. We've had this conversation before, Ken. Chase DeLeo, who was drafted by the Winnipeg Jets when he came in, I had a conversation with him. He's from that area, and he talked about what an influence Tyler Johnson is in that Seattle area to hockey players. He was a real hero for a lot of people in those areas. He showed here in these playoffs in a limited role that he could be still a difference maker. I mean, he's the star of Game 3 of this series. If you can be a star of one of the victories in a Stanley Cup final, you've still got game. So right now, I can see the potential for this to be a risk that the Seattle Kraken want to take. Yeah, he's $5 million for another 3 years. So there's risk there, no doubt. But he's showed he still has some jam. He can still contribute. And the one thing about this guy is he's got as high a character as you can possibly ask for. And that's the kind of stuff that you're going to want to help kind of establish your culture, to carry your culture in Seattle, and to have a local boy to be able to do that. There's value in that. So if you are, it's more than you'd like to be paying. But I don't know, Ken, if you were paying a guy like Tyler Johnson $3.5 million to be on your team, do you think that would be, one of the things that we kind of lose, proper sight of this is the fact that he's on such a stacked roster that he can't be in one of those top lines. But what kind of role could a player like Tyler Johnson play on 20 other teams in the league, right? What kind of role could he play in St. Louis or LA or any of these other cities that could use a little bit of depth? How would he look in a place like Edmonton? I know Edmonton doesn't want to pick up that salary, but my point is, if you take him and put him on lesser rosters, and when you're talking about lesser rosters, you're talking about 31 other teams in the league right now, because Tampa is as deep as it gets. They're the class of the league when you take a look at their personnel. Any lesser roster, and this guy bumps up a little bit more. So I think it's a risk worth taking if you are the Seattle Kraken to bring a player in like that. Hometown boy, hometown hero, still has the potential to get some jam. But if you are able to get another player and take a look at that $5 million that you're spending and say, we're spending that because we are buying the other asset that they're going to send there, I think it makes sense, and it could be the start of Tampa getting themselves in a situation where they can keep pretty much intact what they have here and fill out the rest of their roster with, we were talking about this off air, not off air, but in one of our sound-ons, when they're going through the line and Corey Perry is talking to John Cooper, and you see John Cooper say something to him. I just, it's not that I read lips or anything, but I was wondering to myself, I wonder if he just said to him, hey, if you need a place to play in next year and you want to play for the league minimum, we'd love to have you here. Well, how many of those players are bouncing around the league now? Those guys like Corey Perry, who made a massive difference for the Montreal Canadiens. All he wants is the league minimum. The league minimum makes you that much more money in Tampa, where it's a tax-free state, and you've got a chance to try and three-peat with this team. They're going to be able to bring in really, really good players for cheap as long as they can get under. So I could see them letting some assets slide in order to get rid of a guy like Tyler Johnson. I still think it's going to take another player, though, Ken.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we have great examples of how Tyler Johnson is valued. When Alex Killorn went down, Tyler Johnson went on the second line. When Braden Point blocked the friendly fire from Victor Hedman the other day, it was Tyler Johnson on the first line. So this is a guy that can play, for surely a middle six role on some teams, certainly with a team with no cap issues. We've heard Elliot Friedman speak on 31 Thoughts that he doesn't think Tampa or Seattle wants to add a lot of big ticket players, even though they'll have the room. So to me, if Julien Brisebois, he's going to have to pick up part of the tab for sure. Is that $1.5 million? Is it $2 million? We'll see. But I do think that Tyler Johnson would be a guy who, he won't fit the misfits label of the 2017-18 Vegas Golden Knights, but I think he's a perfect fit for what Seattle wants to do in terms of the program that they're trying to establish there. Love that Elliot crushing the water. Everybody's getting on. Tracy also sent a note saying, I'm going to have to up my game. That's a lot bigger bottle than the glasses in the bottle we've been rolling with. But yeah,
he took a tiny sip. He took a tiny sip and then brought out the bottle of champagne afterwards. Let's not kid ourselves here.
But I do think Johnson, it would be a guy that has some interest, but there's going to have to be a sweetener involved. I don't know what that is exactly, but hey, if anyone thinks that Julien Brisebois can't navigate choppy waters, you haven't been paying attention. So I expect him to be up for the challenge. And you're right, Sean. It is a huge advantage when you're trying to fill out the roster and you're Tampa Bay. You're going to be able to find guys who are willing to take less to try to chase a championship. That's just the way that it goes, which is why we expect them to still be a legitimate contender. And we should also say too, Tampa's still got a strong push from the Florida Panthers in the first round, and Carolina gave them Carolina's a team on the rise as well, but this is a team that's full value for all the folks who may have said, Sean, that you should put an asterisk beside last year's championship, shortened season, expand. Like, you can take that idea and put it in the closet, because that's where it should belong, and that's where it's going to stay, because this is a team that cemented its legacy by winning consecutive Stanley Cups, just doing an exceptional job. And I'm so impressed by what the Tampa Bay Lightning have done over this 10-month stretch. It's absolutely exceptional, impressive, and they deserve kudos for what they were able to get done.
I wanted to go down this road. Tristan Rivers says, watching the Lightning handing the cup from player to player, I kept going, wow, that's a great player. Took 10 minutes before he heard a pedestrian name. No wonder this team won. I believe Braden Point was like the 10th or 12th player to be handed the cup. And I mean, that says a couple things there. One, I don't think by any means is that a suggestion that Brayden Point is the 10th or 12th best player on this team. I think but I mean, when you get outside of the conversation we were having for Conn Smythe, and if you're trying to say who's the best player on this team, I mean, Vasilevskiy's name is there, Hedman's name is there, Kucherov's name is there, Point's name is there, Stamkos's name is there. You know, the list goes on and on and on. But I'll say this about this Tampa Bay Lightning team. And I'm going to have this, I'm going to bring up this story, Ken. 2015, I was down in Tampa covering the Stanley Cup final between the Chicago Blackhawks and the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I asked Steven Stamkos a question about, you know, Kane and Taves and where those guys were in their career. And he'd said, that's where I want to be. Like, I want to look back in my career and say, I did and accomplished the things that, you know, Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves did. Well, mission accomplished at this stage. Back-to-back cups. When he was handed the cup this year, I couldn't imagine what a great moment that was for him to have now been a full part of the run. Remember last year he was injured. He came in for that one game, basically one period, and affected the outcome of that game last season. But it must have been so much sweeter for him to fully be a part of this time around. That's phenomenal. But I love the tradition of the trophy handoff and the skate with the Stanley Cup. It's beautiful because it shows so much about how the players feel about each other. And Stamkos gets that because he's the captain. He hands it off to Hedman. And then who does Hedman hand it off to? But David Savard, the new guy on the block who came in at the trade deadline. You can see it meant so much for them to be able to hand it to a guy like that. Now, he's not that veteran who's like 37 years old, but he's been battling in this league for a long time, has the respect of every teammate he's ever played with and every guy he's ever played against. And they recognize that, and they hand him the cup. Then they give it to the A's after that, and they start passing it from player to player. But again, Brayden Point gets that 10th or 12th. Do you think Brayden Point, who Eric Engels, who may be joining us later in the show, says he puts right near the very top of the list of players to make Team Canada should they send their best players to the Olympic team? Is there any ego from him saying, you know what, I want that cup right away? None whatsoever. This is a team that approaches an old school hockey kind of mentality in the good way, the stuff that we should value about old school hockey, the appreciating the contributions from the top of the lineup right down to the bottom. This organization gets that, and I just thought that was a special celebration when they were passing the cup around, Ken.
Yeah, very cool. And I mean, David Savard, good on him. I mean, this is just an absolute impressive job by a guy who, I mean, hey, normally when guys get it, you're one of the most coveted guys at the trade deadline, you get yourself on a second or a first pairing. But here's a guy who was asked to play more of a third pairing role. We know David Savard's not really a third pairing guy, but I mean, that's the job that he had. I mean, he's playing with Mikhail Sergachev, who's an excellent defenseman and an excellent player, but I mean, he accepted his role, and what happens? He comes out and makes the most important play in the Stanley Cup clinching game. I mean, you have to love that. It's an impressive job. It's everyone thinks it's easy to just go to a team with a bunch of stallions and just try to fit in. Well, he found his way. I mean, the other night he missed the last 8 minutes in overtime. He got banged up, but what does he do? Just battles right through it, and just an impressive job by a guy who is universally loved by his teammates. And I think it's always been important. I mean, fans in Winnipeg are not always thrilled about talking about the old Edmonton Oilers days, but one of the things that Glenn Sather always did was to have a guy or two keep coming in. You want to keep that hunger alive. You knew that the hunger was there. Once you taste, everyone thinks that you can get complacent after winning. No. After you win, all you want to do is win. You don't want to go back to losing. I mean, give me a break. And that's a great point, Puck Luck. You have to be able to, accept your role and thrive in it. I mean, Sean, what were we talking about going into this series? Well, the second line for the Tampa Bay Lightning hadn't been able to get going offensively in this series. Well, guess who scores the Stanley Cup clincher? The second line. Just an absolutely exceptional job. Ross Colton, most of the year spent as a fourth line guy, gets the bump. And this was another great example, Sean, about coaching. Tyler Johnson is more of a second line player than Ross Colton at this stage of his career. But what John Cooper saw was an opportunity to manipulate the matchup on that fourth line by putting Tyler Johnson back in his natural position. He had more speed on that fourth line to contend with the Canadiens' fourth line, and he added a guy who's very responsible in Ross Colton up on that second line. He can be a big body, he's fast, he gets in on the forecheck, and what does he do? Scores the absolute clincher. I mean, what a great job by a guy who had to battle to get into the lineup, and once he made a contribution, jumped up onto that line. But that's the thing, Sean. Second line hadn't done anything offensively. Yes, Stamkos had a power play goal late in game one. It was the 5th goal. But they hadn't done much 5-on-5, but they delivered when they needed to deliver. Most of the series, it was that third line that carried the Tampa Bay Lightning, but when they needed a boost, they got one.
Just going to answer this quick. It was answered earlier on in the show, but Tyler Foley said that he's had a groin injury. So that's would have affected his skating down the stretch. Now that you hear that, it makes it a little more obvious of what we saw from him down the stretch. Final comment on Tampa Bay, because we want to move over into the Montreal Canadiens discussion here. Boy, oh boy. You sure can get jealous. I mean, here we are from Winnipeg, and yes, the Bombers are champions right now. It's great to see that for the first time. And I mean, I was in a high school or maybe even middle school the last time. I was in middle school the last time they won a championship. So you know what it's like to be from a championship star city. You've got back-to-back Cup wins now in Tampa. You've got Tom Brady there, which is a win in itself. You've got him winning a championship there, and you had the Rays of 3 sports teams they've got there. Incredible. All 3 of them are the most recent teams in their championship finals. The Rays weren't able to pull it off, but
and it's then the Heat last year too. The Heat last year losing to the Lakers, right? I think they had all 4 at one time. I mean, we know there's a new one on right now, but
right. But I mean, Tampa Bay, the whole idea of it being Tampa Bay, give them credit. They've done a lot down there. It's a good time to be a sports fan in the city of Tampa Bay. And I'll wrap that up by saying kudos to that organization, or excuse me, that town and their love of hockey. It's real. If anyone thinks that this is one of those organizations that ignores hockey and then shows up for the playoffs, that is not the case. Back in 2015 when I was there, it was a rabid fan base. Stop people in the streets and they would tell you the number one sports team in that town was the Tampa Bay Lightning first, the Bucks, not even the Bucks second, the Florida State Seminoles football team second, then the Bucks third, and the Rays fourth. And if you've ever been to the Rays building, you can see why, because it's the worst place in the world to watch a baseball game. But that order may have switched a little bit with Tom Brady coming to town, but that is a town that loves their hockey. They're knowledgeable about their hockey. Gary Bettman and the NHL take a lot of heat for a lot of the places that they've taken hockey to untraditional markets. That is a glowing success story and has been for a long time. Let's move
great
over.
Barn, right? Great barn, and that's the last thing too. Great for the Lightning to be able to celebrate this time in front of their fans. Yes, they got a parade last year, right on, but I mean, this is an absolutely dynamic moment for them. You can see what it meant to John Cooper when he raised that cup over his head. And awesome for Stamkos. What a story, right? Stamkos didn't really get to play much last year. He lifts that cup in a place where he was first overall, and one of our commenters said it. I mean, to think that a first overall pick like Steven Stamkos, I mean, is he even in the top 5 best players in their team anymore? Yes, he's probably in the discussion, but it's just crazy how impressive that lineup is. And there's the other thing. Awesome job by Stamkos at a time when everyone else thought he should sign elsewhere. He stuck with the plan. He was committed to the program, and now he's been rewarded with 2 Stanley Cups. Incredible job.
Yeah, let's move on to the Montreal Canadiens. Lots to talk about when it comes to them.
Sure, let's
First off, Ken, how'd they pull this off? I mean, here we are talking about this. If you would have told me back in early May that you and I would be sitting here, I'd be in a hotel room in Montreal, and we'd be doing our final Kenny and Renny post-game show of the year, talking about the Montreal Canadiens taking the Tampa Bay Lightning to 5 games in the Stanley Cup final, I would have told you you're absolutely crazy. What came together here for this team that allowed them to have the special run that they did?
Well, it's that time-honored tradition and recipe of excellent goaltending, very strong defensive work, especially from the 4 Clydesdales, and 4 lines deep, and that was the thing that was very impressive. Did they run into a team that had more depth than them? Yes, but Montreal did an exceptional job of getting contributions throughout their lineup. They did a fantastic job of getting scoring from all four lines. I mean, that was something that was very impressive. They have some emerging young talented stars. They have great leadership, starting with Carey Price, but also with their captain Shea Weber, with guys like Brendan Gallagher. I mean, Sean, we saw the joy on the faces of the Lightning, but then you see Brendan Gallagher sitting at the podium on that Zoom call, and for Brendan Gallagher to know how close to get within 3 wins of your goal of getting your name engraved on that Stanley Cup, that is just absolutely devastating to come that close. But he's such a great leader. Phil Dano did just an exceptional job in these playoffs in his two-way game. He did such a dynamite job defensively. He was the human eraser, and you called them that line, the heat-seeking missile. They did such a great job defensively to limit the offense from the opponents. I was very impressed. I love what we've seen from Cole Caulfield and from Nick Suzuki, just emerging stars. I think Josh Anderson is an absolutely excellent player, that power forward. Yes, some people want more from him. That's the problem. When you give it to him once in a while, you want it all the time. But Josh Anderson is emerging talent. He was injured a lot the year previous. I think we're just about to see the best in Josh Anderson. And yes, you could play Toffoli with him, but we've talked about this a lot. I think Toffoli fits better on a line with Brendan Gallagher, where he can be the shooter. You got Caulfield now. I love Josh Anderson with that line. I think that should be Montreal's first line going into next year. Yes, Kotkaniemi. Yes, some folks don't want him scratched, but I think this will be a great learning experience for him. I think he'll come back even stronger. And it's a big offseason for Marc Bergevin. Somebody asked earlier, should we dive into that, or do you have anything to add on how Montreal was able to do it?
You know what? I think that this is, so people keep coming to this question of whether or not the Habs are going to make the playoffs next year. And I do think it's a valid, legit question. And it's funny because you talked about Brendan Gallagher sitting at the podium and how hard it is to come this close and not get there. My response to that is, every team that I can think of other than the Chicago Blackhawks, this newest version of the Chicago Blackhawks, any team I can think of was right where Brendan Gallagher is right now before they got to where they wanted to go. Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov, Andrei Vasilevskiy, who played in that 2015 Stanley Cup final when Ben Bishop got injured, Victor Hedman, all those players have been sitting right where Brendan Gallagher is sitting right now. And you can either take it as that was my chance. And a lot of people have to take it that way, right? Because a lot of players, they've heard enough of these stories. And Corey Perry would have been telling these stories in the dressing room. Stahl would have been telling these stories in the dressing room, how they were there. They won that cup and hadn't been back since. Corey Perry clearly back since last year, but Eric Stahl had not been back since he won that cup with the Hurricanes way back in 2006, right, Ken? 2006, yeah.
2006, yes.
So, yeah, there's that element to that. And you can take it like that, and you can act like, okay, we lost our chance. We had our chance, and we didn't get there. Or you can take a look at it and look at the team that you lost to, see that they've been through this and got their way there, and follow that path. That's the path to winning a Stanley Cup champion, unless you were the 2010 Chicago Blackhawks, who had, Jonathan Toews, who was wise beyond his years, and just a core of guys who were absolutely phenomenal, and, the perfect coach for that team. Unless you were that team, this is exactly the path to get to where you're going. And if you're the Montreal Canadiens, you have to be happy, to the point that you were making, of the youth that were driving the bus through this process. Suzuki is phenomenal. He is absolutely phenomenal. We know that. There's no question. He showed up in the bubble last year and was phenomenal and took the Canadiens to places that no one thought they could get last year, and again led the charge as the Canadiens once again got someplace in the playoffs no one thought they could get to. That's a pattern. He's established that pattern already. Cole Caulfield, up and coming. I said it. I think he's going to score 30 goals next year. That's going to help the cause. Josh Anderson, I think, they're learning how to properly use a player like that. I don't think he's going to be a 30-goal, 60 to 70-point type player, but he can do a lot of really great things for you on the ice. There is reason to be optimistic up and down this lineup, but the playoff question, I do think, is an interesting one because the Atlantic Division next year is Murderer's Row. It is the group of death. It is going to be a battle to make the playoffs. And even if 5 teams make it from the Atlantic next year, it is going to be a battle to make the playoffs. So the Montreal Canadiens, I think the one thing about this, and people want to, to back to your original question, how they got here. I think they got here because they were built exactly for this. But we've noticed something. The teams that succeed in the regular season are the teams that have the Austin Matthews and the Connor McDavids and the Mark Scheifele's and the players who kind of score goals like crazy. Those are the teams that succeed in the regular season, and that changed. It was entirely changed by the third round of the playoffs. And those high-scoring teams can achieve during the regular season. They may not get there in the playoffs, but the danger for not being one of those capable high-scoring teams to get is that you may not get to the playoffs and show off just how well built you are for playoff hockey. I think the Montreal Canadiens are a team that's in danger of being one of those teams.
Yeah, for me, I'm going the other way on that, Sean. But it's for sure they're going to need to take another step. But this is my biggest problem with this argument and conversation. So why are we assuming that a Toronto Maple Leafs team that has not won a single round since 2004? Why are we assuming that Montreal is worse than them by next year? I don't understand this. They won 3 rounds. They were 3 wins away from the Cup. So why are we putting the Leafs in ink in the playoffs next year? Why are we putting Boston? Why are we putting Florida? All these teams, was their path more difficult? Sure, but I mean, I don't think it's possible that happens, and maybe even probable, but I don't think that it's a slam dunk that Montreal suddenly slips to 6th in the Atlantic next year. I mean, I think that they're a playoff team. I mean, we talk about them needing to be more dynamic. Well, they didn't have Cole Caulfield for the dynamic part. The scoring part is there now, right? Now that he's had this playoff run, I think that will help. I think they're going to have to make some changes. They're going to have to elevate their game. But if you have strong goaltending, you have good defense. You might lose one of those guys to Seattle. You might not. We know Romanov basically is going to be he was already a full-timer in most of the regular season. He's going to take another step. But yeah, we know some of those guys are getting a year older. But I mean, to me, Montreal is definitely has better than a fighting chance of being a playoff team. But you're right; they're going to have to try to avoid what has happened to a lot of the Cinderella teams. But I think that it would be foolhardy to underestimate the Canadiens. Everyone underestimated them all year. Why can't they be the team that roared out of the gate this year? Leading the North Division before fumbling for a while and firing their coach. I think a full year of Don Bouchard, look at the impact Bouchard had in terms of getting matchups. But a big question, as someone else has mentioned, I mean, can you re-sign Phil Danault? Because if you don't re-sign Phil Danault, now all of a sudden you're asking a lot of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who was scratched in the last 2 games of the final and the first game of the Stanley Cup playoffs. You're going to have to find a guy that can replace the defensive acumen, and those guys aren't easy to find either.
Had a conversation with Luke Fox. We went out yesterday to one of the places that Eric had suggested. He talked about not the potential, but the idea of Phil Danault taking a heel turn and going to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Would that not blow this market up if something like that happened?
The only place would be worse would be Boston, probably. The only thing worse for them would be Boston.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know that it would be worse. Interesting situation. But I think that Waiters has the perfect counter to the points that you were making here, Ken. Montreal was the dead last team in the play-in last year, but we saw that they played great in the playoffs. I mean, this is the exact thing that we're saying. The Canadiens have proven over these last 2 years that they're a great playoff team, but they're not a very good. They're not even in the top half of the league when it comes to regular season teams. That's the problem here. I do think you're right in the idea of a guy like Romanov getting better and he's going to add some offense. I look at this from a Moneyball perspective. In Moneyball, they figured out the idea. It was purchasing runs, buying runs, and that's how you won games. I think there's a little bit of a transition to that, just by the virtue of what I was talking about, like the teams that do well. Yeah, well, hold on a second here. Price was injured for a while, but while he was playing, he wasn't playing well either.
Yeah. That's true.
And so we do have to acknowledge the fact, well, a big part of this, and we haven't talked about it, a big part of the reason why the Canadiens aren't a great regular season team is because Carey Price isn't a great regular season goalie anymore. We know that he's one of the best goalies in the world in the playoffs, but this just comes down to the fact that there are so many signs about this Montreal Canadiens team that they are a great playoff team, but they're not a great regular season team. And so I think you're onto some of these things, Ken. I think you're onto some of the reasons that we could believe that they could be a great regular season team, because Nick Suzuki is a phenomenal player, and we think that he could start producing more and more and more. And back to the point that I was making before we addressed Tracy, is the idea that if they can get more goals, they're going to get more wins. Cole Caulfield, I've said it here, I think he's going to be a 30-goal scorer next year. That's a lot of goals to pump into and infuse into this lineup. If Toffoli can keep doing what he's doing, if they can squeeze more out of Anderson, they become a more dangerous team in that respect. Romanov, if he gets better on the back end, up and down the lineup, maybe they bring in a guy like Ryan Poehling and maybe he can contribute. But I still don't think, if you're looking at teams that succeed in the regular season, I don't put them ahead of where the Florida Panthers are right now. I think that's a team on the rise. I'm not sure I put them ahead of where Tampa is right now. You know that Boston is going to be active. You know they're going to solve some problems. And I still think Boston is
But we're not even sure if Rask is coming back. I mean, you're going to roll with the two young guys? Or, I mean, I guess you have Halak. But I mean, Boston could have just as many question marks as Montreal next year if they lose Krejci and Rask.
Well, they don't have just as many because they've got a guy who scores a point per game in Marchand, and they've got a guy who, they've got Bergeron, who's one of the best defensive forwards in the leagues and still contributes. You've got Pasternak, who may be the best goal scorer in the league. Like, that's a lot of. They have the
best line in hockey.
Offensively, yes, best line in hockey, and again. I think that we've seen that line got limited a little bit. I think they're at the stage in their career where you can limit that line in the postseason, but there's no reason to believe that line isn't going to keep contributing and pumping goals. There's no reason not to believe that. The Montreal Canadiens remain a question mark in what they are able to do and produce in the regular season. Until they answer those question marks, the question has to be asked.
No, it's a fair question, but I mean, we were talking about Florida. I mean, is Spencer Knight ready to carry the ball? Don't you think Bob is a big question mark between the pipes? I mean, they've got to have great goaltending. But a Winnipegger, Chris Drieger, saved their season this year.
Yeah, I mean, we expect they've got a lot of depth in net to go to try and solve that problem.
I agree, but it's still a question mark. I mean, they've got great talent, and Barkov is 1 year from UFA status. I mean, they're gonna have to sign him. So, I mean. I think there's a lot of these teams in the Atlantic that have significant questions, not just Montreal. And I'm not here to say Montreal is winning the President's Trophy next year. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is there's a lot of building block pieces that weren't there 2 years ago when they looked like they were going to rebuild. The reason why they finished 24th last year, they sold at the deadline, right? They didn't think they were going to make the playoffs. So since that time, no, they did.
Right. It's not that simple, though. I mean, they sold because they were out of it. That's why they sold. They sold because they lost 8 straight games, then right
you were there
before Christmas, and then lost 8 straight games again. They had a stretch where they lost 16 games in 2 fell swoops, right? Like that's the problem they had this year. What happened when they lost their coach? They went to sleep and had won 1 game in 8 or something like that, and then only won 2 of the next 6. Or something like that. This is a team. I mean, I say this, Ken, because you're saying this, and clearly, yes, there's chances. We saw St. Louis take a step backwards this year, and someone said it in the chat room. Some teams are going to rise, some teams are going to fall. What we're addressing with Montreal is systematic performance issues that we've seen rise up in the regular season, just this year, not just this year and last year, but this year, last year, and the year before. The question of why the Montreal Canadiens keep going to sleep for long stretches of the regular season to the point that it puts their season in jeopardy has yet to be answered. They've answered how they can play in the playoffs. No one has any doubt about that. But I still say you take a look at this team, and they're in danger of being a Dallas Stars type team in that they go to the Stanley Cup final one year, and yes, it's a little COVID is in there and there's issues with that, but I will say this about the Dallas Stars. Down the stretch, there were a couple games they played against the Nashville Predators, who I do not see as being a very strong team. I see them as being one of the weaker playoff teams. If they've played that team face to face, win those games, they're in the playoffs. They lost those teams to Nashville. COVID or not, however their season was affected, when their season was on the line, they did not produce, and Nashville went to the playoffs instead of the Dallas Stars. And that's the danger with the Dallas Stars. They are a team that can beat you down, suffocate you, and succeed against you in the playoffs. They're also a team that, like the Canadiens, falls asleep for stretches during the regular season and puts their ability to make the playoffs in doubt because of that. I do think you're right, though. I think the Montreal Canadiens are a team on the rise. They've got the youth to potentially take care of that. I would, if I was Marc Bergevin, not be shy of taking a big swing and going and getting another Tyler Toffoli type player, or someone that you think could augment or add to their offensive outburst capabilities. You know who I'm going to say. I think if they were able to pick up a guy like Patrik Laine, who I think could be available, a guy like Patrik Laine would do really, really good things. And I think in terms of what Columbus would want in return is they'd want futures. Well, they've got great prospects in Montreal, so they could send futures to bring that player in. I don't know how it would potentially fit underneath the salary structure, but you add a guy with the potential to score 40 or 50 goals in a year and have a player right now who could score potentially 30, and Toffoli is a potential 30-goal scorer. Now you're talking about the offensive depth that is going to get you to the playoffs no matter what happens, in my opinion. Let's go to a different spot.
Well, how about
here.
Blake Coleman? Let's sign Blake. Why wouldn't they sign Blake Coleman? I mean, we were just talking about great spots for. I mean, if you want a guy who knows how to win, I mean, a guy who can give you. He's not an elite goal scorer. He could certainly help you. Ray-Ban suggests Gabriel Landeskog. Now we expect him to sign in Colorado, but I mean, Landeskog would be a perfect fit, right? You got a guy who's a big leader, big, strong power forward. I mean, I could see them. I think Bergevin's going to take a couple swings, don't you?
Oh yeah. I think he's. I think, and
he has draft
capital.
To be honest, he also has draft capital.
For sure, yeah, he's got the ability. I mean, that's why the Laine thing to me does make sense, in the idea that he's got exactly what they're going to want, right? He's got futures and the ability to move that to bring a player like that in. Landeskog, I just don't think he scores as much, right? Like you'd want more of a player like Rantanen or I'm not going to say McKinnon because no one's getting McKinnon, but. I think there's enough of and this is the thing about Jesperi Kotkaniemi too, is if you were ever able to get a really good scoring player to play alongside Jesperi Kotkaniemi, I think it would have the potential to open up a part of his game that we really haven't seen yet. One of the things I like about how Montreal has brought this player along, and believe me, I know when I go down this road, people are upset about him getting taken out. And it was said earlier in the chat room that there's that people were upset that he wasn't just for these last couple of games. But one of the things I like about Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and one of the things we know that coaches around the league can like about him, because we've had one on our show, and Todd Woodcroft, who saw him play as a former assistant coach with the Winnipeg Jets and absolutely loves his game, is that he can play, he can use his big body, he can grind, he can be on the right side of the puck defensively. I think they just need to build now from there with his offensive acumen. And if you're able to take in those kind of players, that we heard this, the way Paul Maurice talked about Neil Pionk when he came to the Winnipeg Jets. What gave him confidence? Well, it's the fact that, when he was with the Rangers, you're moving the puck and you move the puck and you make a pass and it works out well. When you're playing with players like Nick Ehlers or Patrik Laine or Kyle Connor or Mark Scheifele, when you make that pass to them and they go down the ice and score a goal, and all of a sudden you get an assist out of that, it builds confidence, right? because you're saying to yourself, I know how to play with good players, right? If you can get that guy that Jesperi Kotkaniemi can get the puck to, and that player goes and does something with that puck and starts padding Kotkaniemi's stats, then you get in his head his ability to not only be the rounded player that they've been working on him becoming, and that he does a phenomenal job of being at the age he's at, but you start adding that confidence at that level to make him become something. They're in a phenomenal spot here, regardless of what happens with Danault, because Nick Suzuki is a star. Outright, Nick Suzuki is a star. He showed he can hang with any line in the playoffs this year, and any level of really good player. He showed he can hang with them, so he's going to be around there for a long time. Jesperi Kotkaniemi, if you can add the offensive part to his game, that is a heck of a 1-2 punch. And then there's other prospects that you can bring in. Paling, I know, as a center. There's different places you can go, or you can bring back Dano and still have that defensive element to it. I think the Montreal Canadiens are built really solidly down the middle. If you can add those pieces on the outside to make things sing, that can create a little bit of fireworks. This team, in my mind, Ken, does go to being an automatic playoff team, but still maintains the ability to be the grinding team that we witnessed in the playoff here that makes everyone's life hell down the stretch in the playoffs. But I'll say this, in the end, what caught up with the Montreal Canadiens in this series, it was their ability to score offense, right? It was their ability to fight their way back into a game and score a goal in a game like tonight. It was their ability to do the same thing and take advantages of the opportunities that they had created for themselves in game 2. If they add that element, and I think that's what they need the most, I think the Montreal Canadiens go from being a team that is a real hard grind in the playoffs, but also a team that has to grind hard to make the playoffs, to being a surefire playoff team, and now one of the teams you have to look out for year after year after year in the playoffs.
Sure, and that's why I used Landeskog, Sean. He's a 7-time 20-goal scorer, and he scored 34 in his best year. I mean, even this year, 20-plus in a 56-game season. I mean, this is consistent production. Plus, he fits the mold. He's a power forward like Josh Anderson, which I think he'd be a perfect fit with Kotkaniemi. And then you could maybe play Gallagher with them. I mean, that completely changes the complexion. Or maybe you play Toffoli with that line. I mean, it's most likely that he'll stay in Colorado, but who knows? And could you find somebody younger and better and maybe an emerging player? Sure. Inner Tap says get Huberdeau. Well, who are you going to give up to get Huberdeau? Yeah, of course it'd be a great fit if you could get him, but he's not going anywhere. So, I'm with you.
If they were going to give up or go after Line A, which we keep hearing time and time again, do you think that would potentially open up the possibility for them to move Huberdeau? Huberdeau is a player I adore. I love Huberdeau. I thought the way he played in the playoffs this year against the Tampa Bay Lightning, that guy is a big game player, and yet at the same time is able to produce in the regular season. A player like that, and I agree with you, I don't see it, but man, oh man, a player like that is exactly what the Habs need. Easy for me to say when you're basically talking about a top 10 goal scorer who knows how to get it done in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, and the reason why we know the reason the Canadiens didn't get Dubois is because they weren't willing to trade Caulfield or Suzuki, which is what the price tag was. So right. I don't think that the Line A price tag would be any less. So that's why I don't. I'm with you. Line A would be a great fit with the New York Islanders or the Montreal Canadiens. I just don't know if either one of those teams are willing to pay the price to get that deal done. In terms of Danault, one quick thing. Waiters, it was 5x5. It wasn't turning down $35 million. It was allegedly 5x5. So we'll see what he gets in free agency. I think
that's too much, don't you think? That's too much if we're talking about Phil Danault, and we gave him credit before this, as we should. This is a player that is one of the best offensive players in the league. But when you talk about the best offensive players in the league, you're talking about players like Barkov, who won the award this year. You're talking about Bergeron, who is nominated for the 10th time or something like that. These are players that are also some of the best offensive players, not just on their teams, but in the league, right? And so if you are going to bring the defensive element, but not really bring the offensive element, and let's be serious at this stage, Phil Danault brings almost nothing on the offensive side of the puck
not this year,
at this stage. Not this year. And it's his contract year, so you have to take that into consideration. I think 5 is too big of an ask. It's too big of an ask for a guy who's not going to score you goals. I mean, no one is looking at Phil Danault and saying, like, hey, when the Canadiens go into overtime and we do the old choose your guy in overtime, how often do you see people picking Phil Danault, Ken? How often have you picked Phil Danault?
Not often. I think once this time. It was when Lehkonen scored, I believe. And Waiters, it was 5-by-5 was what the leak it was. It was never 6-by-5. And again, these numbers were never confirmed. That was what was leaked to the media. We know it bothered Dano, and he struggled out of the gate this year. I mean, is he going to get 4? I bet he gets. I think he gets north of 4. I don't know if he gets 5. We're going to see what happens. But Sean, we know this in free agency. I mean, we talked about this throughout these playoffs. No, he doesn't produce offensively, but what's the value of being able to shut down the likes of Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Mark Stone? That counts for something among teams. And like I said, this is not the old days where Bobby Holik is going to get a massive deal, but Phil Danault is one of the top 10 defensive players in the National Hockey League. He's going to get paid. Would he take less to stay in Montreal?
Don't you think, though, that Jake Evans showed an ability to step in? Like, I'm not saying he could do, as much as Danault had done, but don't you think the confidence that Dominic Ducharme showed over the last couple of games with Jake Evans in that line puts them in a situation where they can say, if Danault is asking for far too much and they think it's going to hamstring this team, that
Sure.
they can go to Jake Evans, especially because with the emergence of Suzuki and Kotkaniemi, that they can go with Evans and he be their heat-seeking missile going forward?
I think that he can be a suitable replacement. I don't think he is near that level at this stage. I think maybe he can reach that level at some point. I think that Evans is better than a fourth line winger, or centerman. I think he can be a third line centerman. Kotkaniemi, I think, can do a great job in jumping up. And I mean, there's the other risk with Jake Evans. He's had a career with a lot of concussions already. So where will the money get allotted? Do they value Danault enough to pay him $4 or $5 million? We'll see. Would that money be spent elsewhere on Gabriel Landeskog or somebody like that who's a more prolific goal scorer? I mean, hey, this is why people like the general managers get paid the big dollars. So I mean, we'll see what happens here, and we'll go from there.
We've definitely stumbled on, I mean, this is clearly a hot button issue. And I know it is in Montreal, the Phil Danault and what he expects to get. I mean, put it this way. I think if you are looking at Phil Danault and at what he's going to be asking for, the comparables have to be with guys like Adam Lowry. Does it not? Do they not play the same role, Ken? I'm not saying that Adam Lowry shuts down people as effectively as Phil Danault, but I don't think it's that far off. And Adam Lowry is a player that's making less than $4 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both agree that Adam took less to stay in a place where he was valued.
Well, and could you imagine that?
That was
happening?
his choice.
Could you imagine that being a less likely scenario than Phil Danault in a French-Canadian market like this? I mean, does he really want to leave a team on the rise and go somewhere else when he's in Quebec, where he loves to be? He's a Quebecois hockey player, flies the flag proudly. I mean, if Adam Lowry is willing to do it in Winnipeg, where he's not from, why would Phil Danault not be willing to do it in Montreal, where he is from?
No, I mean, it just all depends. I mean, agents, players, all these things. You and I think playing at home is a great feat, and it's a great thing. Sometimes it can bring a whole lot of stress and other things. I mean, I think that Danault wants to stick around. I think they can find a way to make it happen. Waiters, sorry, my apologies. My understanding was it was 5 for 5. Yes, there are a few articles that suggest it was 6 for 5. None of this was ever confirmed. So Danault certainly didn't confirm that was what was turned down. So we'll see what happens in the off season.
Yeah. Here's the other thing, Ken. Take a look at this, because it sounds, everything I'm hearing is it's a similar ask. Would you rather have Danault or Hyman for $5 million? Well, I mean, this is a legit question. Danault definitely is it shuts down more, but Hyman's a hard player to play against and is able to contribute on the offensive side of the puck. Like, no one wants to play against Hyman. He's a tough guy. He's a grind to play against. Yeah, for sure.
Big fan of his game also, but it's different styles.
Let me ask you different styles. Let me ask you you this question. If you were taking one or the other for $5 million, which would you take for $5 million?
Yeah, I mean, are you asking me if I'm the GM of the Leafs or the Canadiens? Because do you need a center more?
We're talking about the Canadiens right now. Let's say it's the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I think that you could make the case for Danault. I mean, I personally think I would have to go with Hyman, but
the case for both of
but Hot Lunch is saying, and a very valuable point, centermen are tougher to find. So it's easier to replace the winger than it is the centerman. So, and here's the other part about Hyman, and this is not a knock on Hyman, but how much of that offensive production is related to playing with Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner? So that's your other question. If now you're bringing Zach Hyman to a place where he's not playing on a top, hey, Zach Hyman is effective as a second-line player or a third-line player, and hey, Connor Brown was able to be a 20-plus goal scorer without playing with the likes of Auston Matthews, who he played with previously at times. But Zach Hyman's still going to have to show it when he goes to this next team that he can be a 20-plus goal guy when he's not in that situation. So I'm a big fan of both players, so I'm not trying to be on the fence here by any stretch. But I mean, if you're the Canadiens, you may say that you have Kotkaniemi and Suzuki, you want to have the winger, but I mean, Zach Hyman is more of a hard worker that is tenacious and can score. He's not necessarily he's not solving your natural goal scorer element, even though I think he will continue to produce. So, sorry, I didn't do a very good job of answering that. I personally think I'm going to take Danault, but I'm not necessarily, I would be comfortable. I wouldn't be betting the more. I wouldn't be, if my job depended on it, I would have to give it some more thought. Who would you take? So who would you take?
Well,
I love Hyman.
I'll say this. I would take Dano, but I'm saying that assuming that you can structure a deal that is a hometown discount that reflects the fact that he doesn't get a lot of offensive production, because I think that the last thing that this team needs, people have talked about it, they've got Shea Weber, and yes, this is all worked out for now, and these are big parts of it, but they've got Shea Weber locked up at a big number for another 4 or 5 years at this stage, maybe. I think it's another 5 years. They've got Carey Price locked up at a big number for a while. Brendan Gallagher just signed for big money for a long time as well. And what we keep talking about as reason to believe in this Montreal Canadiens team, when we bring up the reasons to believe, those aren't the names we're bringing up. The names we're bringing up are Caulfield and Anderson and Suzuki. Sure. And a lot of the younger players on this team, Kotkaniemi, those are the players that we are giving a reason to believe that they've got to go somewhere. And I don't think that they can keep tying themselves down long term at big numbers, which are, as good as Weber is, as good as Carey Price is, and maybe you'll argue this, maybe Carey Price is worth every penny to be not in the conversation as the best goalie in the world during the regular season anymore, but in the conversation in the playoffs. And maybe the same thing with Shea Weber, not in the conversation as the best defenseman in the world during the regular season, but in the playoffs. But those are big numbers that those players carry, and I don't think that you can carry Gallagher and Weber and Price and Dano as players that are just going to get it done for you and bring you value in the playoffs at big numbers for a long time. Because when things finally start falling apart, they'll fall apart in the playoffs where the pressure is the most. And you don't want to be tying up too much money in that direction when you're going to want that money to deal with the Suzukis and the Caulfields, because that's the future of this team. And the thing that Montreal has going for them is the future is now for this team. Those players have shown they can get it done at this moment. They're what needs to be built around. And if Phil Dano is asking for a number and a term that is going to put in danger your ability to keep the core of this team together, that's a problem that you cannot go with. And as tough as it may be to do, and as much as it changes the culture and the direction and the way this team plays, I don't think you can lock that down, because you're solving a problem now that is going to become a much bigger problem down the road. Ken, I'm just going to do this. Just before you say something, I want you to hold on to that. I'm going to put on the headband because people have asked for it. And you know what? Tristan's music rocks. We need to hear it on the last show of the year. So let's do Sean's headband. My favorite song.
Beautiful.
Kenny, let's jump back into the response about kind of the old versus young balance with the money being spent on a lot of the older players, but the future of this team very much being in the hands of those younger players.
For sure, and you make a great point. I mean, it's 5 more years of Weber and Price. I mean, those are big tickets. There's no doubt about that. Nobody's arguing with that at all. That's why the term is the most important thing on Phil Danault's contract. What we also are not sure of in a flat cap world, would Phil Danault at his age, does he only want to cash in, or does he want to take a smaller, a shorter term deal and try to take another swing at it with the Canadiens? We'll see. I think that Marc Bergevin is going to take another hefty swing because he knows how quickly things can change, and he knows that this team could be in a situation where it's in a challenge. So I don't see Thomas Tatar being back. I don't think that Danault is overvalued. Oh, no. It's a tough job. I mean, he doesn't produce offense at a high rate, but he does one of the toughest jobs in hockey. So we'll see what happens. I mean, there's some big choices. I mean, I wonder. I know a lot of people have been asking about Jonathan Drouin. I think that there will. Hopefully, he's getting the help that he needs and is going to get himself in a good place. And I do think a place like Seattle would be a great fit for Jonathan Drouin. I know a lot of people had assumed that Jake Allen would be the guy going to Seattle. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case anymore. I think that Seattle would consider one of these, 4 Clydesdale defensemen if they're not all protected, and if they don't go 4-4, and if they go 7-3, 7-3-1. But I do think that Drouin would probably really flourish in a situation like Seattle where we talked about players playing in their home province, right? I mean, it hasn't been a great fit for Jonathan Drouin. He's been feeling a lot of criticism. So I hope that he can get himself in a good place. I don't think that is nearly enough for Patrick Laine. No. I'm sorry about that.
No, I don't either.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. There's a lot of things to be happening. This next 2 weeks or 3 weeks is going to be absolutely fantastic to see what kind of machinations and deals are made, side deals. Maybe they're not, maybe there aren't side deals. Still need a coach. Well, I'm fairly sure that Dom Ducharme has secured the job, and rightfully so. So Dom Ducharme did an excellent job, and he will be back behind the bench. And if he's not, I'll be absolutely shocked.
Yeah, blown away. I mean, unless some other team came in and stole him away with like a crazy offer. This is his dream, is to coach this Montreal Canadiens team. And I can only think that what he was able to pull together with this team this year and the way that he was able to affect this team, I think he feels like he's right where he needs to be and where he wants to be. I don't see him going anywhere at all. Where do you want to go next, Ken?
I don't know. I think we're getting close to the end of the rainbow here. I don't see anybody stealing Cole Caulfield from the Canadiens. He just signed there. He's about to become an absolute star. He had a great playoff, did a great job, and is a guy that Montreal's going to be building around. I don't think they're going to be losing him anywhere.
Is this... is he telling me I look like someone's wife? I don't get it. Anyway, yeah. Love the music. It's been phenomenal. Love the passion in the chat room. Love how the Habs fans really showed up here to kind of go along with the conversation. Oh yeah, Corey Perry. Let's do that before we go. Corey Perry. It's an interesting one. I talked earlier on about if I were John Cooper and I was looking for cheap players to round out my roster, Corey Perry is a guy I would go after. One reason you've always got the no tax issue, which takes a league minimum contract and makes it so much more valuable. I saw people commenting here, and Corey Perry has said it. Montreal seems to be where he wants to be. I don't know that would be any question that the Montreal Canadiens would want him back. Do you think that there would be an issue with them bringing him back, Ken?
No, I don't. As long as Corey Perry wants to play hockey next season. I think Eric Engels was asked about it and has asked me anything when he was at the airport yesterday en route to Tampa. If Perry wants to play next year, and I assume that he does, this guy is hungry to win again. I think that he would be happy to play in a situation where he's going to play 40 to 55 of the regular season games and be a playoff beast like he has been, be part of their power play, be part of their leadership group. We heard Cole Caulfield talk about the impact Corey Perry has had on Caulfield and Suzuki during this run. as much as those that infusion of talent has helped them, the veterans, they had some key veterans around. Even a guy like Michael Frolik, who didn't get into a lot of games this year with the Canadiens. He's such a good pro. He's such a leader. He's a winner, and he's a guy that has really helped some of those young guys along. And I think that a guy like Kotkaniemi would have had some great conversations with Michael Frolik over this last little stretch here about dealing with being a healthy scratch at the most critical time of the year and how that can help him moving forward. Somebody else we asked about some shows. We're definitely going to keep you posted. Our plan, I think, is to probably do a Seattle expansion show. We'll probably do something around free agency, and not sure about the draft or not, but we'll have a couple shows coming in through here. It's been great to have people with us. Sean, you did a great job out in Montreal there. We had a fun playoff run. It was great to get you in a building with some fans during this Canadiens run. It was not quite Scott Oak levels of being engulfed by the people, but the Canadiens fans adopted you, I think.
I was down with the people. I didn't lord above them like Scott Oak did. So let's just say that. I wanted to touch on something quick here. Ken, if you need an agent, I think Akash Bali is interested. He's been trying to get you a contract this entire show, as he should. Impressive. Yeah, thank you. I want to say this for the last post-game episode of Kenny and Renny. Ken, I pitched this idea to you. You jumped on board right away. Mm-hmm. It has been an absolute pleasure and my honor to have gone through this first season with you. I couldn't imagine having a better partner in this venture. It's been so much fun, and it's taken a COVID year that could have been tough on a lot of people all around, and it's made it one of the most satisfying years of my professional career, to be honest, to be able to associate with you. I'm proud to say that I am able to do that. It's phenomenal for me. I'm very proud of what we've built. I'm proud that we're going to hold it together, and I'm proud that we're going to be back. This is good stuff. I really feel like we built something here. I know a lot of our audience say that as well, and they're right to say it. I'm really, really proud of us, and I'm really proud to be associated with you. It's awesome stuff, Kenny. I'm looking forward to a lot of good conversations and good times with you going forward. Everyone else who's interested in that, subscribe to our channel if you want to make sure that you don't miss our stuff. Ken talked about some of the stuff that we're going to be trying to do here. The best way to not miss it is to be subscribed to our channel. Also, if you go and make sure that you follow Ken, if you don't follow him on Twitter, if you don't follow me on Twitter, make sure you do that, because if we're having any shows coming up, we'll make sure we notify people that way as well. Other than that, one final thank you to the people in our chat room. So many of you we've got to know by your names. This is well said right here. Yeah. It is. This is exactly what this is. And I was talking about people we know by names. Tracy is someone that we've recognized right from the very beginning. Shark Mifley, another one. I go up and down this list. We are so proud of the audience that we have, that we've cultivated, of the interactions we've been able to have with you. It's been the best part of this year, is being able to connect with you and chat with you and talk about the stuff that you want to talk about and talk with you. Again, best year for me as a sports journalist. It's been a ton of fun. Thank you so much for being along for the ride. We can't wait to talk with you again. Enjoy your summer, everybody, and we will see you when we see you.